Mr. Mayor, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Καλησπέρα σας και καλώς ορίσατε στο ναό της Δημοκρατίας και του Πολιτισμού. One of the great pleasures of attending the Athens Democracy Forum year to year is the chance to commune with ancient Greece. This is where many of the fundamental precepts of democracy were born, but it is also where the wisdom of human civilization was first recorded. It is very hard to be here and not to feel the great spirit of the philosophers, the leaders, the poets of antiquity, and not to take heart from their guidance. One of my particular favorites when I look for guidance in combating this sense of doom and gloom that comes over me when I look at the challenges we face, whether it's the pandemic, our overheated planet, or wretched leaders, or runaway technology, is to look to Sparta. One of my favorite Spartan quotes was their reply to Philip of Macedon. Legend has it that he sent a message to Sparta saying, "If I invade Laconia, I shall turn you out." The Spartan reply was, well, very Spartan. It consisted of one word, if. Now, I'm not suggesting that we need to raise every youth as a warrior, but the belief of the Spartans that they could vanquish any foe, no matter how overwhelming, is a self-confidence we also need as we confront one assault on liberal democracy after another. We are at war with climate change, fake news, would-be tyrants, inequality, disease. We all watch with horror as a mob assaulted the American Capitol last January, misled by the lies of shameless leaders and conspiracy theories spread over social media. That battle is far from over, and when it is over, there will be more battles. At this point, the ancient Greeks would no doubt make their way to Delphi to consult the oracle. This was a great tradition. Not only was the oracle a woman and therefore much wiser and more credible than any of the bearded warriors who ran the city-states, but she spoke in the magnificent rhythms of δακτυλικό εξάμετρο. It would be great to consult the Pythia. Trouble is that she might tell us something we really don't want to hear, as when she informed the Spartans. Love of money and nothing else will ruin Sparta. Aka, inequality. But there is no oracle at Delphi anymore, and it may be heresy to say this, but maybe we don't really need a prophecy. The tragedy of our time is that we know what needs to be done, whether to save the planet, stop the pandemic, curb the populace, or clean up social media. The question is how to do it. How to persuade people living in democracies that they have the tools, the science, and the wisdom. What they need to do is to believe in them and join forces in making them work. It is a question of trust, really. And that is the panel that Patrick Healy, the Deputy Opinion Editor of the New York Times, will moderate this evening with three wonderful speakers, Yuval Noah Harari, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, and Mete Koban. I look forward to hearing how they believe that we can regain trust in this world. That really is our task here at the Athens Democracy Forum. We know what is wrong. What we need to do is tighten our togas and come up with real and actionable solutions for the future. I would like to thank our speakers, not only for this evening, but also for the 4 days of this forum. I would also like to thank our headline sponsor, Facebook, and it is much appreciated that in such a volatile year, We have so many supporters who believe in the mission of our forum, like our gold sponsors, Luminate, Google, EBRD, the Council of Europe, Babin Yar, the Greek presidency of IRA, and many more. Above all, I would like to thank Stephen Dunbar Johnson, the President International of the New York Times, in whose place I'm actually delivering these remarks, as he was not able to make it in person due to COVID regulations. But he is here virtually, and Stephen, thank you for your support. As most of you know, this conference was born some 9 years ago at the New York Times, and it is testament to that institution's foresight that they did allow it to evolve under the non-profit structure of the Democracy and Culture Foundation, which stays closely linked with the Timesian sensibility, but as an independent entity, and that way we can focus more on the do part of our impact chain, think, talk, do, for the attainment of two outcomes we have as a foundation: citizen engagement and better governance, the two derivatives of democracy. Mayor Bakoyannis and the city of Athens remain faithful stakeholders of this endeavor, as do the United Nations Democracy Fund, aptly represented by Annika Savill, the executive head, who is here also virtually and speaks after the mayor. Kofi Annan Foundation is also a most valued stakeholder. Mr. Mayor, you will forgive me. I spoke about Sparta and Delphi, but we all know that Athens is really the cradle of humanities and democracy. I certainly have no intention of starting a Peloponnesian War, but at the end, we all know that democratic Athens prevailed over oligarchic Sparta. It is Athenian democracy, ladies and gentlemen, that we need to regalvanize, and that is what this forum's heart beats to. I'm happy, by the way, to see the statue of Confucius and Socrates just a few meters from here, and I encourage you to go and visit them. And tonight, Kwame Anthony Appiah, of Ghanaian descent, is taking the place of our Aristotle address. All this in your city, Mayor, which speaks volumes on Athens' spirit of inclusion and human values. So, Mr. Mayor, thank you very much for your support and for hosting us in this beautiful and inspiring city. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Mayor of Athens.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a true privilege to welcome you to Athens, and I would like to thank the organizers for bringing us all together, despite and against the odds. The Athens Democracy Forum is now proudly in its 9th year and has become a true institution. So many congratulations to Achilleas and his remarkable team. And rest assured, Achilleas, we don't want a war with Sparta, but if there is a war, we are planning to win this war this time around. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a brave new world. This summer's record-breaking heat wave in Athens and the whole Mediterranean region, among other extreme events, like the flooding in Northern Europe, has underscored the urgency of addressing the global climate crisis. And we all know that such efforts will require significant redirection in policy and financing from all levels of European and world governments. The task is clear: to reduce carbon emissions and to take adaptation measures to prepare communities for extreme weather. But make no mistake, the question of climate change is a question of democracy. Or to put it differently, only democracy can effectively respond to the climate crisis. Evidence clearly shows that democracies are actually better for the environment. It has been proven that mature democracies, regimes with expanded rights, stronger institutions, and low levels of corruption have less urban pollution than others. They also have better environmental policy measures and outcomes, and they also have stronger commitments to address climate change. Democracies, and this has been statistically proven, are actually more likely to sign and ratify multilateral environmental treaties, to designate larger areas of land as protected, and to participate in more international climate and environmental organizations. The UN Climate Glasgow Conference in Glasgow this fall should make this climate democracy link more explicit. Only in democracies, can citizens hold their leaders accountable regarding their concerns, and we all know that people are actually concerned about climate change and environmental degradation. And even though, clearly, a democratic form of government does not by itself guarantee that a given country will lead a climate or on environmental issues, it is actually the only form of government that gives the people a chance to include their concerns in their political agenda. Case in point, just a couple of weeks ago, an international study by the Pew Research Center showed that even before the summer fires and extreme heat, 87% of the Greeks, now for anyone who actually knows us Greeks, the fact that we can agree to such a percentage is remarkable, said that they were concerned about the personal impact of climate change. Athens and the Greek government have been listening and responding to this crisis with newly found measures and resolve. In Athens, we have been assertively moving forward with expanding and revitalizing our urban nature, adding new parks and improving the existing ones, while implementing innovative mitigation measures such as subsidizing SME energy upgrades or even producing a map that evaluates the solar energy capacity of CO2 emissions reduction for each and every one of the roofs of our city's buildings. With the help of C40, we are currently ready to launch our new climate action plan, and in collaboration with the Arch Rockefeller Center, we were proud to present the first chief heat officer in Europe. For our team, building climate resilience means actually understanding the challenges that our city faces and finding the most intelligent and integrated ways to deal with them. Resilience is, after all, about maximizing the benefits and ensuring that we don't create additional risks now or in the future. It also has to do with protecting the most vulnerable, maximizing the adaptive capacity of the poorest neighborhoods, which we all know are the most affected by rising heat or flash flooding. Resilience is about equity. It's about social justice. It's about bringing different players into the process across sectors to ensure diversity, flexibility, and redundance. With different stakeholders in each project, we create transparency and ownership in and outside government to ensure continuity and build up trust and social cohesion. Climate resilience, finally, is about creating adaptive policies that help future-proof our cities to face the physical, social, and economic challenges of the climate crisis. We don't have a surplus of money, and we don't have a surplus of time. We must spend wisely to build economic development and sustainability, to promote health and well-being, to build government transparency and accountability, and to reduce the gaps of economic and social inequalities. Ladies and gentlemen, Athens, the city that first allowed the will of the people to be the rule of the land, has a recorded history of continuous inhabitants spanning well over 3,000 years. Athens, as you can all see, looking around, is the very definition of a resilient city. The recent pandemic has dramatized the crucial importance of mature democracies in a globalized world. the need for the rule of law, and the rule of reason supported by transparency, accountability, and a bias for collaboration. Athens has, in the last 10 years, faced and survived a prolonged economic crisis, a large migration influx, unprecedented temperatures, and a global pandemic. These challenges initially brought the rise of a neo-Nazi party and widespread populism across the political spectrum. But our democracy prevailed. Our democracy is stronger, and we are now going through a post-populism era. Our trajectory might well provide an example to countries currently undergoing populist and authoritarian convulsions. Climate change is the mother of all crises. As it advances, it will increasingly produce a series of cascading troubles that will affect multiple sectors of our societies at once: migration, food, water, energy shortages, and many more. Populism, misinformation, and political instability are detrimental to our capacity to bounce back. To deal with today's global crisis, we need more democracy. We need humility. We need data-driven policies. We need an openness to innovation and collaboration across borders. It is evident that the many authoritarian rulers around the world today are ineffective at providing solutions to problems and are actually dangerous to their own people. What we need for the far-reaching crisis of today is forward international collaborations that can offer cross-sectoral support and foster innovation and social cohesion locally. Now, more than ever before, it is critical to build a modern world, a resilient world, bottom-up. Many, many thanks, and once again, welcome to Athens.
Excellencies, friends, fellow champions of democracy, warm greetings from UN headquarters in New York. As head of the UN Democracy Fund, I'm proud to have been a founding partner of this annual gathering all the way since 2013. 9 years. A short minute in the history of democracy. An eternity given events in the world since last year. If nothing else, the time we all spent in lockdowns, quarantines, and travel bans has given us all time to think. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says in his message to you, and you have the text in your programs, all of us must learn from the lessons of the past 18 months to strengthen democratic resilience in the face of future crises. This means we all have to get better and smarter at handling a range of challenges. The Secretary General mentioned several. I would add, how do we work effectively against the disinformation that mushrooms with every crisis, ensuring critical reading among the public? How do we overcome polarization in society, learning to use tools like citizens' assemblies? How do we address the unequal toll that crises take on women? How do we prevent the disastrous disruptions that crises inflict on young people, especially in education? I join the Secretary General in expressing gratitude to all of you for thinking hard about these issues, not only at this forum, but until we meet again. Thank you.
Trusting others is often quite rational. If we have a common interest, for example, I can expect you to secure my interest because it's also yours. In a well-made contract, I may have made myself vulnerable to betrayal, but I haven't risked much. If I can tell whether you could prep my trust, I can reward you for compliance or punish you for non-compliance. And because you know that, you have reason to keep my trust, independent of whether you care for my interests. Trust really comes in only if I think you will give my interests some consideration, whether or not it matters your interests. So trust, this attitude, makes most sense in the context of an ongoing relationship. If the relationship is rich enough, it will be impossible to keep track of all the costs and the benefits, let alone to sum them. As a result, in normal human relationships, the default response to being trusted is to look after the other's interests without calculating the costs and benefits for oneself. That's how trust works among private individuals. But we're here to talk about politics and about the public significance of trust. It's not obvious when one first thinks about it why trust should matter for politics. Thomas Hobbes, writing in the mid-17th century, thought politics began with the creation of the Leviathan, his state, which was a device for people who thought they had no reason to trust one another. His sovereign is there, in effect, to distribute rewards and punishments for respecting each other's legitimate interests, precisely because often we cannot rationally entrust things to one another in the absence of the state. Thomas Jefferson used the word confidence to discuss what we call trust, and concluded that in questions of power, then, let no more be said of confidence in man, but bind him down from mischief by the chains of the Constitution. That thought is Hobbes's. What makes the Constitution work is that we are fearfully suspicious of one another. Jefferson thought that if the institutions were rightly designed, it would be in the interest of each of us to do our part. We could be entrusted with our social roles, but we wouldn't really need to be trusted. Indeed, the whole Madisonian theory of the American founding could be seen as an exercise in the design of institutions created for people who do not trust one another. But this makes representative government a little bit mysterious. When we elect members of parliament, congressmen or presidents, why should we think that they will have at heart the interests that matter to us? There are millions of us with our own bundles of interests, some shared, some consistent but distinct, some conflicting. How could it be reasonable for all of us to trust in this context? Well, an honest and well-informed free press whose members have a vocation to cover what is relevant and to explain it, to uncover the hidden that should not be hidden, to be guided not by partisanship, by evidence, political parties that bear the costs of breaking their promises and discipline their members in order to maintain a reputation for reliability, a political culture that respects the principle that even if one can take advantage of the vulnerabilities of one's fellow citizens, one should not. These are the sorts of things that can make it reasonable to entrust the government to others. The grounding of what is sometimes called vertical trust, the citizens' trust in institutions, need not, in fact, be trust in any person. We just need, again, as Jefferson argued, to structure the institutions so that this vertical entrustment is reasonable. But the running of the state and of interstate relations involves dense networks of relationships among officials. These are interpersonal relations of exactly the sort I started by talking about. How does Brussels or the World Trade Organization or the G7 or NATO or a school of other international military and economic arrangements and institutions actually work? Why are they enabled by private institutions like the World Economic Forum? Because the officials who work in this world make up a sort of international political society, staffed with diplomats and military officers and civil servants and business people who regularly interact with their counterparts from other countries. These are the career internationalists. They can prevent tensions from turning into conflicts and conflicts from turning into wars. They defuse and de-escalate. They bargain and compromise. They bank trust and sometimes spend trust. And their interactions are too dense to be managed by a simple calculation of interest. Of course, it's part of their profession to represent, to acknowledge and understand interests, and to know how to rank them. But in building trust with one another, one by one, they create a web of interpersonal trust that the states and other institutions they serve rely on. And rightly or wrongly, many citizens of our democracies see evidence of horizontal trust among elites as grounds for wondering whether it is reasonable to have vertical trust for those elites. trust within the elites, the coziness of officials meeting in front of the cameras, generates skepticism among citizens about whether they should entrust them with anything. And the reason they've lost their faith in the capacity of elites to deliver what is entrusted to them is not that they think they know better than elites do what policies are in their interests. It's rather that they have seen that the existing policies have not brought them what they hoped for, and so they have lost confidence that the elites can be trusted with their interests. In many places, there are many people who don't believe what the government or the press tells them. In others, many doubt that the elites have the competence to deliver even when they want to. And in yet others, they think that the elites' trust in one another has turned them into a class that pursues its own interests, indifferent to the interests of those below them in that vertical relationship. They may suspect, too, in an age of large corporations and hyperaccumulation, that political elites are being bought off by the financial elites. Skepticism about elite competence isn't surprising, but the corrosion of faith in institutions cannot simply be pinned on the failure of elites. It's at least as much the result of the circulation of nonsensical paranoid narratives, especially through the new digital media. Russian disinformation, it has often been observed, works not because we believe it, but because it engenders a more generalized distrust, such that any news can be dismissed as fake news, even the truth. The so-called information wars are, in the end, wars against information. Their efforts to undermine the authority of fact, and trust is their intended victim. Despite the populist resurgences, despite the crises of authority in terms of belief, we continue to benefit from great reservoirs of social capital that make our social, civil spaces work. People make themselves vulnerable to one another in small ways all the time in daily transactions, without needing to calculate the interests that guide other people. These experiences give us no reason to believe that other people are normally untrustworthy, even the strangers we meet on the street every day. Still, citizens do not need to understand a political fact to notice it, and the willingness to trust their affairs to existing elites is surely only rational when those elites appear to be competent and aimed at the ends with which they have been entrusted. And so I wonder if the answer to the decline of trust, especially the vertical trust towards political elites, isn't simple enough. Elites need to work harder to earn back popular trust, telling the truth more often, even when it is uncomfortable and complex, being more honest about each other, rejecting the unreasonable demands of rich individuals and institutions, and creating structures that are reasonably transparent and effective in policing the behavior of officials. The people have often been sold the wrong solutions, but they are typically right in their awareness of the problems. On that, the elites can trust the people.